The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Sports is not only what I do for a living, covering it, it's my passion. It's my hobby. I watch games. I love watching games. I keep up with the news. For the life of me, I did not know that Major League Baseball was holding a draft lottery last night, and the Nationals, who were not the worst team this year, not all that good. They finished 20 games below 500, but I had no idea that they would have any kind of a factor if there was a draft lottery. It's not like the Wizards, where you're always thinking, can they get the number one pick? Well, they had it last night, and the Nats with a 10% chance of getting the number one pick, they got the number one pick. Now, as opposed to the other 2 years that they got the number one pick, everybody knew who the number one pick was going to be. In 2009, it was Steven Strasburg, of course. And in 2010, it was Bryce Harper, of course, who had been on the radar for years. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a high school sophomore. So, we knew about those guys, and we knew that they were the number one pick. And in those days, there was no lottery. You finished with the worst record, you got the number one pick. And then teams started to Potsky around with tanking, and it was working, like the Cubs, like the Astros, like, nobody else comes to mind right now, but there are probably another one or two teams that did that. And they said, we got to stop this. You got to stop them from tanking. It's not like the NBA where, you have a guy who can totally change the fortunes of a franchise. I mean, Victor Wembanyama, the ping pong balls landed properly once again for the San Antonio Spurs, and he's going to change the fortunes of that franchise probably for the next 15 years. It's different. It's different in baseball. You don't know if the number one pick is going to turn out. Now, the ones that the Nationals got, great. I mean, Steven Strasburg is the biggest reason they got their World Series. The contract extension they gave him, not good. But I'd do it 100 times out of 100 at the time, knowing what they knew then. It was a no-brainer to do it. They did it. It didn't work out. But for a city that had not had a World Series champion in 95 years, I'd say it was worth it. And Bryce Harper wasn't here to win a World Series, but he gave people some great moments here, a lot of good teams that went to the postseason on his back. He was the MVP of the league. So those were two great picks. Who they're going to pick with number one, we don't know. But this was a shocker to just about everybody last night when it came down to the top two picks as televised live on the MLB Network.
All righty, here we go. With the second overall pick in the 2025 MLB Draft, the Los Angeles Angels, which makes the number one overall pick, the Washington Nationals.
Wow, Matt Adams, you delivered.
He always delivers. Big city.
It's for the third time in franchise history, like D-Rose said, the Nats have the number one pick. Yes, they landed Steven Strasburg in 2009, Bryce Harper in 2010. The Angels with the number two overall pick after winning 63 games last season. It's the highest the Angels have selected since they took Darren Erstad, number one overall in 1995.
Why did they mention the name Matt Adams? Well, Mike Rizzo, GM, just happened to run into Matt Adams in the lobby. Adams played on the 2019 World Series team, and he said, hey, would you like to represent us at the draft? And Adams goes, yeah, okay. So, it's not like he has a lot to do. He just sits in the seat. We watched draft lotteries for years, and he sits down in the Nats spot, and what do you know? Luck be a lady tonight. He winds up with the number one pick. And after the selection, Mike Rizzo went on the MLB Network to celebrate with everybody.
My congratulations. Now, do you have to take Matt Adams out to a steak dinner? How does this work?
There's no doubt. It was a good find in the lobby by Matt Adams. And, he was a member of the 19 World Champ team, and we're glad that he's the one who pulled the number.
You're a scout by heart. I mean, you couldn't miss with the likes of Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg. What goes into the number one pick? I know you're vetting a bunch of guys, but what do you look for, Mike?
It's obviously skills and tools are important, but you have to delve deeper into it. A lot of pressure on the 1-1 and going into this thing. This is my fourth 1-1 pick of my career, and you're looking for character guys that can play the game and fit seamlessly into the organization, culture-wise, development-wise, and you're going for the most impactful player that you could find.
Mike, you also get the largest bonus pool to work with in our game today. That's significant. So how do you now begin to look at the strategy of going into your draft year?
Well, it's about asset allocation and getting the best bang for your buck at each and every round that you can participate. And there's a lot of strategy goes into it. Like you said, you're just not picking each round, giving them the slot. You're doing things that you have to. We'll figure out a strategy on which way we're going to go. We're in capable hands with Danny Haas and Brad and Reed Dunn and those guys, so we feel good about where we're at.
So you Strasburg and Harper. Who was the other one now?
Justin Upton. With
those three picks, Mike, did you learn anything from each of those selections that kind of lend itself a little bit more to be able to help the guys that are actually going to be making those decisions and evaluations?
Yeah, I think that what I've learned from those picks is that don't get too ultra focused on one player in one draft season. Have a wide scope and really scour the country and especially with the draft pools being so large and allocating money differently, you can really do some interesting thing and impact your draft throughout the entire.
So real quick, are you I'm taking the best player guy, or am I taking a good player to make sure then I can take other good players down below? Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, I'm most impactful guy I usually take, but we'll have the discussion with Danny Haas and his people and see if we can come to some kind of agreement.
Timing is everything, but where your club is right now, ready to explode, ready to emerge with so many young players, you could conceivably take a quick to the big leagues player at number 1 overall because the timeline would match your club at the moment.
Yeah, it's so interesting and intriguing on so many different levels. We can a lot of different ways we can go. We're obviously very excited about where we're at. We've got a good system in place right now. Getting the first pick is just going to add to that and add value to our organization. And we will, we're extremely excited. We're lucky, and we don't want to be in this position ever again.
Well, you hear that every time a team goes number one. But in this case, it wasn't like they finished with the worst record like the White Sox, who were just horrendous this year. What they did was they had a year where there was some promise with some young players, and you hope that, they can build around that with whoever they take. And, they haven't spent any money in free agency quite a while, and they've got money to spend. And off what happened the other day with Soto, okay, they're not going to go that high, but you got to start to bring in some players. Now, as for what they will do with the number 1 pick, the Rizzo philosophy has always been to build around starting pitching. Can't have enough starting pitching. And drafting pitchers, not a bad idea, though. Baseball America, when they're ranking the top prospects, they have 2 position players at the top. Texas A&M outfielder, I think it's J.C. Laviolette, and high school shortstop Ethan Holiday. Well, Ethan Holiday, if that name sounds familiar, his brother Jackson Holiday is the second baseman for the Orioles, and his dad, of course, Matt, was a longtime major leaguer with a bunch of teams. Matter of fact, just imagine if they do take Ethan Holiday and he winds up playing for the Nats, the Holiday family ought to move to Columbia, and they could be like at a baseball game every night because it's rare when the Orioles and the Nats are home at the same time. So you could go to an Orioles game when they're home. You could go to a Nats game when they're home. You wouldn't even have to travel very far, just up and down 95 to make that happen. Now, there are 3 pitchers after Holiday. And Holiday, by the way, is shortstop. Not that he couldn't be moved to another position with C.J. Abrams playing shortstop, but there's some issues at the end of the season. Abrams was with the team late in the year when they played at Chicago against the Cubs, and he was in a casino until 8 o'clock in the morning. And for disciplinary reasons, they sent him down to the minors for the last weekend of the season. So, maybe that's just one incident. Maybe they get over that, but it could be a could be something that concerns them about his maturity and whether they want to invest in him long term. And this is a high school shortstop, so best case scenario, he's in the majors in like 2 or 3 years. So you got some time to make some decisions on that. After that, after those two position players, Laviolette and Holiday, then you have pitchers. UC Santa Barbara right-hander Tyler Bremer, Florida State left-hander Jamie Arnold, and high school right-handed pitcher Seth Hernandez. So those are just names. They don't mean anything to you other than Holiday. But when they have the draft in July, this will be a continuing build for a team that's got, some really good young players, some nucleus there that they can build around. And Rizzo winds up getting the number 1 pick last night. Tom Boswell wrote yesterday, and he wrote on kind of an interesting day because, and this actually broke during the show, we mentioned this, but he got an award that, frankly, I'm stunned that this didn't happen 20 years ago. It's like, really? Tom Boswell is not in Cooperstown? He was named the 2025 winner of the Baseball Writers Association of America's Career Excellence Award. Well, he retired 3 years ago. But even, before that, Boz was the preeminent, I think, baseball columnist in the country. There were others that, have been successful as columnists and baseball writers, like Tim Kirchin, who got an award, I think it was 2 years ago. And then Kenny Rosenthal, who covered the Orioles and other baseball matters for the Baltimore Sun for many years, and now is with Fox. A lot of these guys have gone to TV. Boz did some radio, like early in his career, I think NPR, but really stayed away from broadcasting and just pounded out great baseball columns. So, he's now in his 70s, and when you hear that, you go, really? Boswell wasn't in already? And now, rightfully so, he's going to go in. And although he's retired, he's following the Shirley Povich retirement plan, in which you write quite a bit. And, Shirley Povich, his last column appeared the day after he died. So he was prolific up to the end. He retired in 1974 and died in 1998. So he had almost a quarter of a century of, quote-unquote, retirement and writing columns. But Boswell today did what he has done throughout his career, including before the computer age came in. He was analytics before analytics. He always was big on numbers. So he took a look at the Juan Soto contract. And his takeaway is, this is not a good deal at all for the New York Mets. And on the back end of it, they're likely to be sorry. He writes this: Soto has no blame for this gaudy excess. Yeah, he didn't put a gun to anybody's head. They gave him the money. He's 26. His career is a nearly flawless diamond. His closest statistical comparisons at his age are some of the best players, especially early career players ever. Bryce Harper, Frank Robinson, Ken Griffey Jr., Mike Trout, Eddie Matthews, Miguel Cabrera, and Mickey Mantle. And he says, remember those 7 glamorous names. And add 2 more, Andrew Jones and Orlando Cepeda. He writes, if the last 10 years of Soto's contract, starting at his age 31, are similar to those of the last 9 of the 9, 7 of whom have retired, Soto will keep his dignity, but the Mets won't. As a group, the 7 stars who retired have averaged only 137 home runs for the remainder of their careers, starting with their age 31 season. So remember, this deal is going to take Soto until he's 41. So you're looking at the last 10 years of his career, averaging 13 home runs a year. That's not a $51 million a year player, right? Robinson and Griffey were the best. Both played exactly 10 more seasons through age 40. Robbie averaged 115 games, 21 homers, 68 runs batted in a season, and Griffey managed 19 homers and 57 runs batted in a year. Mantle was typical, only 132 more homers in his 6 seasons. How happy do you think the entire decade of the 2030s is going to be for Steve Cohen if Soto gets paid $510 million, all of it guaranteed, to hit 137 home runs? Want more data points? Look at Trout. The past 2 years at ages 31 and 32, he was injured for 2/3 of the Angels' games, hit .252 when he played. Harper was exceptional in his first 3 years as a Philly, including an MVP season, but the past 3 years at ages 29, 30, and 31, he's down to 123 games a year with 23 homers and 75 runs batted in. Elbow surgery has moved him from right field to first base. The Phils are happy with him, but they paid him $330 million, not $765 million. Soto is one of my favorite hitters to watch, Boswell writes. I really hope I get to watch him hit 388 at age 38 like Ted Williams, or hit 40 homers at 39 like Hank Aaron. But if Albert Pujols could get creaky and only hit 261 from age 31 onward, then old age still has its thumb on the wheel. And, sometimes, as he points out in other parts of the column, you have a billionaire with stupid money to spend, and he just wants that. He wants that gem. He collects art. He'll overpay for a piece of art if he wants to. He even brings up an example of a painting that Steve Wynn had for sale. Steve Wynn, his eyesight is very poor, and the deal was $139 million for the painting. And Wynn, when showing it to somebody, accidentally stuck his elbow through the painting. Still, years later, Cohen bought the same painting anyway for $155 million. So he had to have it. When it was in perfect shape, he was willing to pay $139 million. It got damaged. He backed away, but then he thought to himself, nope, got to have it. Paying $155 million. This isn't going to hurt me in any way. I'm worth billions. And as we said yesterday, Steve Cohen's wealth, from the time he bought the Mets in 2020, over 4 years, it has gone from $14.5 billion to $21.5 billion. So his wealth has up by a third, and what's a contract of $750 million spread over 15 years to a guy like that? Remarkable. We'll do some NFL next. It does not look good for the Saints in terms of injuries, including starting quarterback, and I'll give you the numbers on the alternatives for them with the likelihood that Derek Carr is not going to play. Jay Gruden also on his podcast Clean Pocket has a look at what he thinks will happen in this game. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
I'll get to this in about 20, 25 minutes or so. There is another 30 for 30 coming out from ESPN on Friday night. It's called the New York Sack Exchange, and it's about the New York Jets front four of the 1980s, where you had, four great defensive linemen. Joe Klecko is in the Hall of Fame. Marty Lyons, coming out of Alabama, was a great tackle. And you had Rashaan Salam. And then you had a defensive end, Mark Gastineau, who is a horrendous person. Let me put it that way. I'll get to that coming up. But he's part of the focus of this in a big way. And this came out yesterday, this incredible piece of video of Gastineau confronting Brett Favre at what looks like a card signing show. I don't know how many years ago this was, or maybe it was just recently. And look, Favre has got his own mishegas and is facing some very serious charges about funneling welfare money into his alma mater to help the volleyball team that his daughter was playing on. So, he's got his own stuff. But this is really, really embarrassing. And what you see Gastineau do is incredible. I don't have the video, obviously, but I'll play the audio of it and go through what I think is just a terrible person in Mark Gastineau, and looks like, from what I've seen from the preview clips, he isn't treated very well and isn't remembered very fondly by his ex-teammates in this either. I've seen the clips of both Klecko and Marty Lyons, who said he was a selfish guy. And he is. He's a selfish person. So that's coming up. But meantime, Commanders back on the practice field today. They're 7.5-point favorites going to New Orleans on Sunday. And I wonder if it'll even increase a little bit, because this has now come out. Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network is reporting that Derek Carr suffered a, quote, serious fracture to his non-throwing hand and could be out for the season. Now, we've seen guys play with broken bones and play with injuries to the non-throwing hand. And, 1 year Kurt Warner played with an elbow injury where I don't even think he could bend his right elbow, his left-handed passer. I don't think he could even do it and somehow managed to make it through a season. So we've seen that, and guys with broken fingers and all that. But he's unlikely to play, which would leave New Orleans with these two quarterbacks. Jason, is it Jack Haener? It's Haener. What's his first name? His first name is Jake Haener. Jake Haener is he played last week, and he's He's played in 7 games this year. He's 14 of 29, 177 yards, 1 touchdown. So he's got a little experience. Spencer Rattler, the rookie, actually has played more. He's had 3 starts. He went 0-3 in the starts. He was 59 of 99, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. So either way, you're going to see an inexperienced quarterback, it looks like, on Sunday with the Saints. And that, should be something that they can feast on. We'll see. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of blitzing. And the other thing that could really help the Commanders is Marshawn Lattimore, who they got at the trade deadline from New Orleans. It looks like he's finally ready to play, and that's why that they said that they released Emmanuel Forbes right before the bye, because they think that Lattimore is ready to go. Jay Gruden does a podcast every week with Colt McCoy. It's called Clean Pocket, and he does game previews. And this is what he expects will happen on Sunday. And it's interesting when you listen to him, and I've played a couple of his previews before. He hasn't been the coach of the team since 2019. He has said some things about Dan Snyder that are not surprising, but, frankly, he wasn't a very good coach and has not had any interest at all, not just in being a head coach, but even being a coordinator. There just isn't anything for him. So he's now in media, and he takes a look at game previews. But listen to how he uses us and we. Kind of surprised about that. I don't think he's drawing a check from Washington, but obviously he still has some allegiance. It's the only team he was the head coach of, and more than likely will be the only team he's the head coach of for the rest of his career. But this is his look at what he thinks will happen with a backup quarterback likely starting for the Saints.
The big thing they have to understand is they cannot take this game for granted. This means way too much. Dan Quinn has got them in a position to be in the playoffs in his first year. He's in position to possibly win Coach of the Year. They have a lot of good things going. This is something they have to take care of on the road. And it's not easy to go on the road at New Orleans. Trust me, I don't care who's playing quarterback. That's not an easy place to play. So it's Coach Quinn's job and the coaching staff's job to get this team mentally and physically ready to go and make this like, hey, this is a playoff game, because really the next 4 games are playoff games for them to keep their stats or status as far as be the number 6, 7, or 5 seed in the come playoff time. They have no chance to win a division, but being in the playoffs first year with Coach Quinn is a great testament to his coaching skills and the players' ability to make plays. Just got to beware now. When teams have injuries, sometimes you can take them for granted. Say, they got nobody. Valdez-Scantling is really their only weapon on the outside. They still have Alvin Kamara, and they have a pretty good run game. So I think when you're defending New Orleans, big playability of Valdez-Scantling, we got to take that out. We got to have somebody over the top of him all the time. Erase that. And now we got to focus our attention on Alvin Kamara, because when they get the outside zones going, we understand that the play passes off of that to Moreau, to Johnson, to whoever it is on a high cross, low cross is very effective, especially for a young quarterback if he has to play. So we got to get Alvin Kamara, make sure we get him stopped, Valdez-Scantling over the top, and I think defensively we should have a pretty easy day holding them to under 13, 14 points. And then offensively, hey, let's just get back to business. Let's out-physical the opponent. All right, with our inside zone, our power game, our 2 tight end sets, our 3 tight end sets. Let's get B-Rob going up the middle, Chris Rodriguez going up the middle, and then we'll hit our play passes and get Terry McLaurin going on the outside. That's our recipe for success. And then obviously, Jaden, you just do your thing, man. Just here's the play, make it work. If it doesn't work, make us right by scrambling for 15 yards or, buying some time and hitting somebody on the outside for a big play. So we got a lot. Washington has a lot going for them right now, but New Orleans is a tough, and they're just, they played the Rams tough a couple weeks ago, 21-14. They shut out the Rams in the first half. You all saw what the Rams did to the Bills yesterday. They beat the Giants 14-11. So they're hanging around football games, and that's what Washington can't do on Sunday. Don't let these guys hang around. Treat New Orleans like you treated Tennessee. Get on them early, get on them often, and give these guys no reason to believe. Because if you get on them early, they have no chance to come back with a possible backup quarterback in the game. They should be fresher. That is a long season for these guys. The bye week is going to help, especially for the big guys. They've been wear and tear on their knees and their bodies and their backs. This is a chance for them to get back into some stretching and some light lifting, get their bodies back in track, get their minds back on track, and get them ready to go. But you want it a little bit earlier, but this is really a good time, especially if you are in the playoff race. Everybody's going to be healthy, and Washington has been very, very fortunate with the injury bug. They have not hit it at all. They lost Austin Eckler. They had a couple minor ones, but if you look around the league, there's been a lot of teams with major catastrophic type injuries, and Washington is fairly healthy. And usually the teams that go on in the playoffs and far in the playoffs are the teams that stay healthy, and this bye will help them get key players back on the field and be fresher. So early in games, late in games, they should have a full tank of gas to get after the Saints. Sometimes when you have a bye week, people worry about being a little rusty coming back, but I think with the young football team, like having Jaden Daniels, I think he'll be ready to get back and work very quickly. He's the type of guy that looks like he probably took a day off, and he's probably been in the office watching film and getting ready for the next 4 games. So I think rust is not an issue. Terry McLaurin is a very precise route runner. He's going to be good. The offensive line are very good at their combination blocks. Defensively, they should know their gaps. I'm hoping to get a little bit more out of Armstrong, a little bit more out of Fowler, a little bit more out of Farrell, get some more out of Deron Payne up the middle. Let these guys play. But having the force and having the leadership of guys like Bobby Wagner on defense, and then offensively, having a quarterback like Jaden Daniels, I don't think that creeps into the building, any rust or anything. These guys are going to force the other players around them to play hard, play well, and focus on the next down. The simple keys are always the simplest ones. You got to do good on third down, good in the red zone. You got to protect the ball and stay away from dang penalties. Penalties can ruin a day for you. You have 2 good plays, and all of a sudden you're in 2nd and 20. And obviously a roughing a passer keeps a drive going for the Saints. So you got to stay away from those penalties that you can't control. Obviously, protect the football at all costs, and obviously your situational awareness has got to be on point. 3rd down, 4th down, red zone, all that is very, very important. And then let's not forget about special teams. We got to make sure this Gonzalez is our kicker moving forward. He's had some issues. Our kicking game's got to be on point as we get play Philadelphia, Atlanta, and Dallas the next 3 weeks. Obviously into the playoffs. Tressway is doing a great job. Let's make sure we focus on special teams. No big plays given up on special teams. Let's make one ourselves. No big plays on defense. Let's make sure we make them earn every blade of grass that they can. And offensively, we're going to do what we do. Our identity is a physical, pound and ground team with Jaden Daniels' explosiveness outside the pocket on zone reads and RPOs, and then obviously the big playability of Terry McLaurin. So I feel real good about this Commander game on Sunday. I think this should be a victory for them quite easily, but New Orleans gets paid too. They're going to come out and they're not going to make it easy for the Commanders. But I believe at the end of the day, Washington has just got a much better team.
Use that quite a bit. Again, as far as I know, not drawing a paycheck from the Commanders, but obviously some allegiance. Hey, he's got a couple of players. He did coach Terry McLaurin when he was a rookie, so maybe he's got some allegiances there. But it's kind of interesting. Tressway was there, of course, to hear him say that. But we are, 2 weeks removed from the 50th anniversary of Clinton Longley. So never underestimate the possibility of what can happen with an inexperienced quarterback. And as Larry Cole said about what happened on that Thanksgiving in 1974 with Clint Longley coming off the bench for an injured Roger Staubach and throwing 2 bombs for touchdowns, it's amazing, or I'm paraphrasing here, but what can happen with an uncluttered mind, meaning he was just ripping it and just throwing it. And for whatever reason, Washington had secondary breakdowns, and they wound up losing one of the most incredible games that the team has ever played for a franchise that goes back to Boston in 1932. So, what you don't want to have is, whoa, did you see what Jake Haener did? Or did you see what Spencer Rattler did against a seemingly playoff-bound Washington team? So anything can happen. I don't know if you saw this yesterday, but and this is rightfully so. She certainly deserves this. That Caitlin Clark has been named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year. I didn't even know that Time Magazine did an Athlete of the Year. I know that Sports Illustrated does Sports Person of the Year, And last year it was Deion Sanders, which didn't make a whole lot of sense as Colorado won only 4 games. I don't know who it's going to be this year, but it's about this time of year that they announced this. So we should find out in the next week or two who the sports person of the year is. But Time Magazine named Caitlin Clark Athlete of the Year. And what she did for women's sports in 2024 was incredible. I mean, let's face it. I mean, both at Iowa and what she did for the WNBA. Now, there's a long interview with her in the magazine. I have not read this yet, but there's one part of it which, strikes me as a little bit odd. I've known Christine Brennan for 40 years. I consider her a friend. She is a groundbreaking journalist, one of the first women to cover a professional football team. She's written best-selling books. She's had a prolific career with the Washington Post and USA Today and has been, over the years, a huge champion of women's sports. And she is now in the process of writing a book about Caitlin Clark. And she was in the eye of the storm this past year because in a playoff game, Caitlin Clark got poked in the eye by DeJoni Carrington. And it was a blowout game that Connecticut Sun won 93-69. But there was a big storm around Caitlin Clark throughout the year, that there was clearly jealousy on the part of veteran players there, some black and some white. But there was who is this woman to step into the league and get all the attention when we've been, toiling for low money for all these years, and she's got a, $27 million shoe deal or whatever it is. And so there was some question, about how they felt about her, which led Christine Brennan to ask a legitimate question after the game. She asked DeJoni Carrington whether the poke to the eye was on purpose. And this created another storm. The Players Association for the WNBA was livid about that. And so in talking to Sean Gregory of Time Magazine, Caitlin Clark said about the poke in the eye, "Never once did that cross my mind that it was on purpose. I've been poked in the eye many times playing basketball. It happens. If that would have happened in the NBA, do you think people would have showed up the next day and been like, hey, Therese Halliburton, did you poke Steph Curry in the eye on purpose?" No, that wouldn't have come up, Caitlin, because there isn't that kind of feeling about Steph Curry in the NBA. He's an established star. You were a rookie, and you were taking the attention away from him, so Christine asked a legitimate question. And she also noted that on the bench that Carrington was laughing it up with her teammate Mariana Mabry, and that was caught on camera. And Carrington, she handled the interview fine. If you can watch it on YouTube, it wasn't like she got upset at Christine's question. She said, "I can't laugh about something I didn't know happened." And okay, and you take that for its face value. But Christine wasn't badgering. She was asking what was a legitimate question on the part of people watching the game, I'm sure, and people around the league. Did this actually happen on purpose? Because we've had situations in men's professional sports where things like that happen. So she asked. It wasn't like she accused her. She asked. The WNBA Players Union said that Christine's interview was, quote, unprofessional and called for USA Today to discipline her. Clark told Time she wasn't aware of the union's response, but backed its call to have Brennan reprimanded. The whole line of questioning that Carrington got was not appropriate. I did not like that, Clark said. I'd be interested to talk to Christine about this because I assume in writing this book about Caitlin Clark, she has her cooperation. I don't know if it's a money thing or anything like that, but has this fractured whatever relationship they had. Christine is as professional as they come in this business, so she wouldn't be swayed by anything like this. But clearly, Caitlin Clark is she, and she's kind of walking a fine line here. She knows how the other players feel about her, and she just wants to establish herself as a basketball player. But this is not going to help her in terms of jealousy from the other players. She's got this big, not that magazines are meaningful anymore, but a lot of attention on her, continued attention on Caitlin Clark, and she should be considered the athlete of the year, male or female. What she did for women's sports is phenomenal. Not just basketball, but all women's sports. But for her to be critical of Christine in this case, That's just wrong. That's just not understanding anything about the business, and she should have a better understanding. She's been in the eye of the spotlight for years, not just her senior year at Iowa, but her junior year too. She's been the focus of women's sports for a couple of years, and I really am disappointed in her for kind of throwing Christine under the bus here. She doesn't deserve that. She asked a legitimate question based on other factors that were surrounding it. Now, if Caitlin Clark had been treated differently by the WNBA players, if there hadn't been all this carping and griping about her, then yeah, it would have been a kind of a ridiculous question to ask. But given what was said about her publicly, not behind the scenes, but publicly about her, absolutely. She was doing her job as a journalist. And I know she takes more pride in being a journalist than anybody I know in sports. I mean, people who do what I do, we're not journalists. We're not. People on television, for the most part, who are not reporters, are not journalists. She's a journalist. She's a sports journalist. And she was doing her job, asking a legitimate question. And now the backlash, I'm surprised it's coming from Caitlin Clark as well. I would have steered clear of that if I were her. Mark Gastineau. Wow, that's a name you hadn't heard talked about much. Well, he's going to be back in the news for a while, and I'm anxious to see this on Friday night. There's another 30 for 30 coming out about the New York Sack Exchange, and a lot of it has to do with Mark Gastineau, who clearly is living in some kind of fantasy world now, thinking he should be in the Hall of Fame, and then angry at Brett Favre for, as you'll hear him say, stealing his sack record. Get to that and the background of Mr. Gastineau as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Before I get to the video clip of Mark Gastineau confronting Brett Favre, which has gotten so much attention over the last 12, 18 hours, let me just read into the record who Mark Gastineau is and was as a player. I was working in New York towards the end of his career with the Jets and was in the Jets locker room enough during training camp and during the regular season, both games and practices, to know how much he was reviled by his teammates, and rightfully so. There have been selfish athletes in the past, but none who seems to have been universally hated as much as Mark Gastineau was. Was he a great pass rusher? Yes, he was. Did he accumulate a lot of sacks? Absolutely. Was he a terrible guy as a player? Yes. And he seems to be a terrible guy now, almost 30 years after he finished his career. 1988 was his last season with the Jets, and he retired in the middle of the season. It's pretty remarkable that he got to where he got to, though, and that's a story in itself. He went to East Central Oklahoma State. That's after junior college and a one-year run at Arizona State, where I guess he didn't make much of an impact. But he goes to East Central Oklahoma State, which is now known as East Central University. I don't think they play Division I, or they certainly don't play FBS. But anyway, that was small school, and he had some big numbers, 27 sacks. And the Jets, as it just so happened, the year he was coming out of school, 1979, they were coaching the Senior Bowl. Staff coaching the Senior Bowl. It rotates based on, I think, where you finish in the playoffs or something like that. But just so happened that the staff was handling the Senior Bowl, and there was a scout by the name of Connie Carberg, one of the first female scouts in NFL history. And as they were getting ready for the Senior Bowl, they realized, we're short a defensive lineman, and it was Carberg who suggested that they bring in Mark Gastineau. I mean, he played at East Central Oklahoma State. Who had heard of him? But she did her research. I mean, this is 1979. We didn't have laptops then to look these things up at the fingertips. She had to do some research. They brought him in, and he was great in the Senior Bowl, and he was projected coming out of school as an 8th-round pick. They don't even have 8 rounds anymore. It's 12 rounds in those days. And because of his performance in the Senior Bowl, Jets took him in the 2nd round, and they added him to an already good defensive line with Marty Lyons and Joe Klecko and Rashaan Salam, and they became the New York Sack Exchange. And they combined for 66 sacks in 1981, even though sacks were unofficial then. Sacks did not become an official statistic until 1982, believe it or not. So, some of Dexter Manley's sacks that he had as a rookie, they're not official. Dexter is the all-time, or was the all-time sack leader, I guess, for Washington. Ryan Kerrigan, I think, broke his record. But anyway, they were a well-known group, the New York Sack Exchange. They had posters made and so forth and so on. Marty Lyons, good citizen for sure. Joe Klecko, good citizen. Drove a truck in the offseason. Rashawn Salam, not as well known as the others. Gastineau was a guy who was about Gastineau. And early on, he had some legal trouble. 1983, he went into a nightclub with a rookie quarterback, and he was arrested for a fight in that club. He was Mark Gastineau, charged with assault at Studio 54. Mark Gastineau and Ken O'Brien. And then he had the sack dance, which the NFL actually outlawed. There was a period of time, NFL's gone back and forth on this, on touchdown celebrations and sack celebrations. He had this big sack dance. So look at me, at a time when not a lot of guys were doing this. He was doing it. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated with Lawrence Taylor in 1986. These two monster defensive players playing in New York. And but he also was prone to make some mistakes. And they were playing the Cleveland Browns in a playoff game. This is 1986. And they're up 20-10. Browns are facing 2nd and 24 from their own 18. And passes incomplete by Bernie Kosar, but Gastineau gets called for roughing the passer. So it's instead of 3rd and 24 with the 15-yard penalty, it gave the Browns a first down at their own 33. From there, the Browns drove the remaining 67 yards for a touchdown to cut the lead to 2017. The Browns would later tie the game. 7 seconds left on a field goal by, Mark Mosley, who had been cut during the season by the Redskins. They wanted on a 27-yarder by Mosley in overtime. So, his over-aggressiveness in a situation where it didn't have to be. And then in those days, man, it's not like these days where you breathe on a quarterback and they call roughing the passer. You had to be pretty vehement about the way you tackled a quarterback to get called for that. And this was the 80s, a lot different. That's the days of the body bag game and things like that. Also this, 1987, Gastineau was the only Jet to immediately cross the picket line in the players' strike. He said he needed to do it to pay his alimony. Teammate Dave Jennings, who I knew, he was a terrific guy, died of Parkinson's several years ago. He was a punter for both the Jets and the Giants, finished his career with the Jets. And he said that this was very unpopular. We expected it, though, from Mark. He always put himself in front of the team. The crossing brought to a head a long-standing tension between Gastineau and his teammates, and he'd never been popular in the locker room. And I was in the locker room that season. I saw that. Gastineau led the AFC in sacks 7 weeks into the 88 season. He then abruptly announced his retirement soon after Brigitte Nielsen, she had dated Sylvester Stallone before him, previously announced his engagement to her, claimed that she had been suffering from cancer of the uterus. That did not turn out to be the case, fortunately. But he did remain retired until he tried to come back with the BC Lions of the Canadian Football League in 1990, but was released after 4 games. That ended his football career. He tried a boxing career in 1991, lasting 5 years. In his first fight, he knocked out Derek Dukes in the first round. Dukes, a professional wrestler, later admitted he took a dive. 60 Minutes interviewed several others that fought Gastineau and were told to take dives to make Gastineau look good. His boxing career ended in 1996 when he lost to Alonzo Highsmith, another former football player. He was married 3 times. He went to jail, was sentenced to 18 months in jail for failing to complete an anger management course after hitting his second wife. In 1991, he was arrested for picking up a package of amphetamine pills at a Phoenix Sky Harbor airport. He was sentenced to 3 years probation in 1993. And after his release from prison, he claimed that he had put his turbulent past behind him and had a religious conversion and appeared on programs such as the 700 Club to speak about his experience. He has been, according to Wikipedia, been diagnosed with dementia, Parkinson's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. Okay, that's sad. And he also said 5 years ago that he's battling colon cancer. So he's got health issues. You can be sympathetic to that. But this is absolutely ridiculous. If you remember, at the end of the season in 2002, Michael Strahan sacked Brett Favre to break the then Gastineau record of 21 and a half sacks in a season. And it looked kind of dubious, did Favre take a dive? I don't know. But, he got it was counted as a legitimate sack. And having covered Gastineau, I was quite happy to see his record go away. And, not that I had any special allegiance to Michael Strahan, but, Strahan got the sack record. He odd it with 22 and a half sacks in a season. And so, okay, years pass, and, Gastineau, who had already been retired for 4 years when that happened, you didn't hear much from him. Well, as part of this 30 for 30, which you'll see on Friday if you watch it, this happens when Gastineau shows up at a card signing show where Favre is signing autographs and confronts him over his anger about the fact that his sack record was taken away from him.
Anybody will tell you Brett Favre took a dive. And you know it. She knows it, he knows it, and everybody knows it. Excuse me. Finally met. Now you tell me.
We met a long time ago. At least I saw you.
Right.
How you doing?
When you fell down for him. I'm gonna get my sack back. I'm gonna get my sack back, dude.
You probably would hurt me.
Well, I don't care. You hurt me. You hurt me. You hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
You really hurt me. You hurt me, Brett.
We got to get back to this, Brett. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was Brett Favre's handler. Now, Favre's got his own Michigas, so I'm not going to deal with that now. But come on, get over yourself, really. And by the way, I mean, not that anybody talks about the sack record that much. I guess most people know that Strahan's got it, but they don't walk around saying, hey, there's the sack king. Well, it's a guy who's on Good Morning America and on the pregame show on Fox. And there are two other players, by the way, who have tied Gastineau's record. Jared Allen, 2011, Justin Houston in 2014 with 22 sacks. Oh, Strahan didn't break it by a full sack. He broke it by a half sack. So he's 22 and a half. And T.J. Watt tied that in 2021. So really, Gastineau, get over yourself. It was always about you, always trying to get attention, and it's just pathetic. Now, okay, if he has been diagnosed with dementia, maybe some of that is showing up with that pathetic little confrontation that he had with Brett Favre. But this is a guy who was just always hated, and rightfully so. And to get himself across the picket line faster than anybody else. Now, there were other players that did cross the picket line eventually, and once again, the Players Association lost. But he couldn't wait to get past the picket line. And for a teammate who was already reviled by many of the players on the team, that didn't help his standing at all. He did finish that season and played half of another. But to say that he belongs in the Hall of Fame, please, he does not belong in the Hall of Fame. And, the league isn't going to take away the sack that happened. Brett Favre went down. He went down in a circumstance where he was trying to preserve a victory in the game. I mean, come on, really? So I'm really anxious to see this. And that group was very well known. They anytime you play in New York and you start to do things and you make posters and all that, you get known. But, I think a lot of the focus of this is going to be what a terrible guy Mark Gastineau is, and deservedly so. He deserves that label. All right, that's enough of that. Coming up in the next hour, Bobby Wagner, who's the opposite end of the spectrum. He's up for the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award for the Commanders. He was on yesterday on the Pat McAfee Show. And also, Rob Gronkowski, who played for Bill Belichick, analyzes how good Belichick might be as a college coach if, in fact, he winds up the head coach at North Carolina. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So a week ago, if you would have suggested that Bill Belichick might wind up as head coach at the University of North Carolina, you would have been greeted with, what? You got to be out of your mind. He's waiting for an NFL job. He's never coached in college before. How's he going to handle the NIL? Oh, yeah, sure. You think Bill Belichick at age 72 is going to become a college coach for the first time? Well, things are moving along quickly, and the latest is if North Carolina accepts his conditions, that he will become the next coach there, replacing 73-year-old Mac Brown. I mean, this is some youth movement they got going on there, but yeah, things are moving quickly on that, and we will get to that. Jeff Saturday, who's seen it from both sides, he was briefly a head coach himself a few years ago with the Colts. That obviously was an odd situation that wasn't going to work, but he was given the opportunity to do it, and he said, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. And now he's back on TV and realizes that's probably where he's going to finish up his career. But he's got some insight on that as well, and we'll get to that shortly. Some other NFL stuff to deal with, including Bobby Wagner, who is up for Walter Payton Man of the Year. What a phenomenal job he's done with Washington this year. And if you remember, I don't always get these things right. I'm wrong probably more often than I'm right. But I said when they acquired Bobby Wagner that it reminded me very much of what happened with Jack Pardee when he came here as part of the George Allen Ramskins in 1971. George Allen came in. He said the future is now. He traded away most of his draft from 71 and 72 and brought in a lot of his old veteran players from the Rams. And those guys were the backbone of the team for a couple of years when they achieved success that hadn't been seen around here since World War II. They made the playoffs as a wild card team in 71. And in 72, they made it to the Super Bowl, and a lot of it was because of guys that he brought in, like Dyron Talbert, who was not only a great defensive lineman, he was a great leader on that team, but the biggest leader was Jack Pardee. And Jack Pardee was essentially George Allen's defensive quarterback on the field. He'd been a great player for the Rams with him. He obviously was very cerebral. He went on to a coaching career, long coaching career, coaching the Oilers and the Bears, coached the Redskins for a few years, coached in college, and loved the game of football, great hard worker. And he was the one that called the signals, always had players in the right spot, always was in the right spot himself. And the defense pretty much revolved around Jack Pardee and his leadership. Well, Bobby Wagner, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame and was Dan Quinn's guy when Dan Quinn ran the defense in Seattle, there was an opportunity, as you hear here, that they could reunite in Dallas. That didn't happen, but now Quinn comes in here, he brings in Bobby Wagner, and that's obviously been a great move for the team. So Wagner yesterday was on the Pat McAfee show talking about the fact that he's up for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award and how he reunited with Dan Quinn this past offseason.
We tried to make it work a couple times in Dallas, and he tried to get me, but it just didn't work out. And then when he got the Commander's job, he was one of the first people that called me and was like, what you think? And I'm like, I'm good. And, we just had to figure out the numbers and stuff like that. So, it's definitely like once I saw that, and then they brought in Coach Norton, who I've been around for a very, very long time. It just, the steps that was being made just made more sense. And, I think from a culture standpoint, that's really what I felt the organization was missing. Somebody that's out front and center, creating a really cool culture that not only the players and people within the building believe, but people outside the building believe as well. And so, I know we had the guys, a good mixture between older guys and younger guys that can really expedite this process. But, I think it's between the coaches, the players, everybody just bought in real quick, and it doesn't surprise me.
It's been fun to watch. A couple Hail Marys, both to the Lord and on the football field, obviously, have taken place as well. Is this a team of destiny? Who knows? Speaking of destiny, long time in the league. D-Bud has a question for you, Bob.
You've had an incredibly long and productive career. I think 13 seasons now, over 100 tackles, tied with Ray Lewis. Only the Iron Man, I think, is ahead right now. What's kind of been the key to that longevity? Being out there, being available. What's your off seasons like? How do you take care of your body, and how has that changed throughout your long career?
I think it's just staying active. I think, I forgot who told me this advice, but as you get older, you have to just stay active. And so whenever I get done with the season, whenever it ends, I might take like a week off. But after that, I start like playing basketball, or I try to get in the pool. I just always stay active. And I think that's just allowed me to stay in the best shape. I do yoga a lot, which I feel like a lot of guys should get into. And it's just like you try to do the same things in the off season, or same things during the season that you would do in the off season. So whatever I'm doing right now during the season, I try to like even though we're not playing games, I'm trying to still do that same routine. So my body's just constantly used to being pushed in that facet. So I think that's probably played the biggest part.
That's Bobby Wagner. And by the way, when he said that we tried to make it work, he's his own agent, and he's doing an MBA program right now at Howard. I wonder the year he's had. I would think that he'd come back for another year. I'm not sure about that, but I would not be surprised. Comes back for another season. They'd have to sign him to a new contract because it's a one-year deal. But he's been everything that they hoped for, probably and more. And the Iron Man is London Fletcher. That's the only player who's ahead of him in terms of the streak of 100 tackles or more. It was 14 straight seasons for London Fletcher. And if you remember, when Fletcher was playing here, he was just a tackling machine. He just, I noticed his tackles more than I do Wagner. I don't know why, but each of them very prolific, obviously, in getting tackles. NFL item number 2. And I saw Kevin O'Connell talking to Rich Eisen before the season, and even though they had taken J.J. McCarthy number 1, O'Connell is saying, nope. He said, we are not going to start him at the beginning of the season. This is not a quarterback competition. We'll bring him along, but Sam Darnold is going to be our starting quarterback. And I'm thinking, yeah, sure, come on. Sam Darnold, he's on the scrap heap. He's in his 7th year. He washed out with the Jets. He was with the 49ers. Come on, this is not, a realistic thing. And, well, J.J. McCarthy gets hurt, so that takes out the possibility that McCarthy can compete for the job. And what do you know? They have lost only twice, and now you have the question, well, what do you do? What do you do with a guy on a one-year deal who's having a phenomenal season, has this team in contention to get to the Super Bowl? I mean, right now you would probably favor the Lions and the Eagles, but, with 2 losses, you got to figure Minnesota is going to be in the mix there. And so Tony and Mike looked at this yesterday as to what the Vikings should do with Darnold in the offseason.
His play may be forcing the Vikings into a quarterback quandary. Darnold threw 5 touchdown passes Sunday, received MVP chants from the Minnesota fans. The 7th-year quarterback had been considered a bustola prior to signing this one-year deal with the Vikes in March, who then drafted J.J. McCarthy to be their future in April. But McCarthy's injured, Darnold's excelling. So, Tony, should the Vikings pay Darnold as their long-term starter despite having drafted McCarthy at number 10?
I love this question. The question is, should Sam Darnold get paid? If you've watched ESPN in the last 3 years, the question's been asked 1,000 times, but this way, will the Cowboys pay Dak? Should Dak Prescott get paid? So if it's somebody else, very exciting to me that it's somebody else. Let's look at Darnold's numbers for a second because I wrote these down. 3,299 yards passing so far. That's 6th in the NFL. 28 touchdowns, 3rd in the NFL. 68.4 completion percentage, 7th in the NFL. 3rd-rated passer in the NFL, behind Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff. Ahead of Joe Burrow, ahead of Josh Allen. Should you pay him? And you're asking me this question, should you pay him because they've drafted J.J. McCarthy? What does J.J. McCarthy have to do with those numbers? Those numbers are good. You don't want to pay him for one reason, Mike. You're afraid that the Sam Darnold of the Minnesota Vikings is going to turn into the Sam Darnold of the New York Jets. You're afraid.
2 reasons.
So franchise him.
2.
So give him $40 million for 1 year. He makes $10 million now. It's 400 times what he makes.
There's that, and there's playing a rookie quarterback at his salary. So you can do all sorts of other things with the team. That was part of the Bears' quandary with whether to deal with keeping Justin Fields or drafting somebody who starts the clock over again in terms of salary with Caleb Williams as a rookie. So you've got that whole thing with the Vikings. You don't know whether Darnold's going to turn into, well, this is a Cinderella story or not. And at midnight, he's going to turn back into a pumpkin. You don't know.
Yeah.
But, Tony, it just seems if you could get him at, I don't know, somewhere between 30 or 40 a year, you're not giving him Dak's 60. You're not doing that. If you can get him between 30 and 40, maybe you say, wait a minute, we got a guy here who still should have a 4 or 5 year window of good play if you believe in him in that
27.
system with that coach.
He's not old. He's not like Geno Smith, another reclamation project who's 34. He's not that old. And by the way, McCarthy may be real good next year. This guy is real good now. On the field, real good.
I think what's going to happen with the decision on Darnold, it's probably both ways. let's say they get to the NFC Championship game. Then I think it's a no-brainer that you bring him back. If it's a first-round exit, maybe things are a little bit different because, for all the regular season stuff, and that's important, getting to the playoffs and playoff positioning, it's really what the postseason that matters the most. And if he's really good in the postseason and they get to play either Philadelphia or Detroit or somebody else that pops up, then you really got to think about it. One step away from the Super Bowl, can they take the next step the next year? And he's got to look at it that way too. And he could ultimately increase his long-term value if he does have a year that's putting him in the discussion for Super Bowl. Now, they also have the franchise option. I don't know if they do that, but what we saw here with Kirk Cousins, that gives you a 2-year window. And the 2-year window might be enough for them to compete for a Super Bowl while they develop J.J. McCarthy. And although you took him 10 overall, so what? He's not making that much money as a rookie quarterback, and based on rookie quarterback salaries, so what? So we see what's happening in Green Bay. They're on their third straight franchise guy, and the last two sat for 3 years. So I don't think it's out of the question for both sides that it would make sense for Sam Darnold to come back to Minnesota. Number 3 on the hit parade here from the NFL is what's happening with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And as much of a surprise as the Vikings have been, the Steelers with 2 quarterbacks and now with Russell Wilson, they have put together a season which should have them in the discussion to get to the Super Bowl from the AFC. Now, most people would put them behind, obviously, Kansas City and Buffalo, but they have looked really, really good this year. We saw them here. Their defense is good. And with a 10-3 record and a coach that's won a Super Bowl, you got to think of them as in the mix. Cam Hayward yesterday on the Rich Eisen show on how they've responded to the coaching of Mike Tomlin and what this season has been all about.
When you look at this team we have a really good patient offense, with Russ at the helm, having Najee run the ball, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, sprinkling some Jalen Warren in there, and an offensive line that just keeps growing. On the other side of the ball, you got a defense that's just hungrier than ever. We are hopefully gearing up for, a stretch drive right here. But, you got TJ, myself, Minka, Alex Highsmith, Patrick Queen, Dante Jackson, Joey Porter Jr. We got a multitude of guys that, are all just trying to make a name for ourselves as a defense. And then you jump on the other side and you got our opportunistic special teams. I can't say enough about how good they've been this year. Miles Killebrew, Chris Boswell being accurate as ever. We have a complete team, and, that's showing up on Sundays.
And then obviously your coach, who I adore. And I just want to get to this crucial part of your season, certainly from my position, sitting here in front of a microphone talking about it for a living. When Justin Fields is 4-2 and then gets switched out for Russ, I was sitting here saying, why change? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You got a 4-2 kid here making the most of his opportunity, and then they switch it. Obviously, Mike has the ability to do something like that and the foresight to do it. But you clearly didn't know. Nobody knew that Russ was going to play in the manner in which he is, and then go 6-1 after that with lots more to go. That's my long windup. Here's my question. It's like, what was it like, though, for you, veteran, on the defensive side of the ball? What was happening in that locker room when Mike made that switch, Cam?
I think he approached it in a way where Mike T was transparent to begin with. He said, we have 2 quarterbacks that could start anywhere, and I'm going to give Russ an opportunity here. The thing he asked from everybody was make him look right in his decision, and that's our job week in and week out. So there was never a question of us questioning what he wanted. It's just we got to make this guy look right. And Russ and Justin have handled it beautifully. They're always communicating. They're always talking. And we understand that we're going to need both these guys to get to where we want to get to.
So Mike just came in and said, did he announce it? That, hey, we're switching to quarterback? He did. He did?
Yeah.
In a team meeting in front of everybody?
Team meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did he, in fact, say, make me look right? Is that what he said, Cam, or you said that?
I think we said it, but it was along those lines. But I think, I think for the most part, Mike T is like, I make the decisions. It's up to us to make them look right in those.
Okay, give me an example, Cam, because we saw it on Hard Knocks a couple weeks ago with Nick Herbig, another kid on your defensive side of the ball, balling out, where Mike was hyping him up all week to go against Zeus Brown of Cincinnati, and hyping him up and saying, they got this guy because Highsmith was basically abusing the line, and it's your job now. This is your job this week. I want to see it from you. And then Herbig comes up with the big sack, forced fumble, big, huge play for you guys, and it happened. And I was sitting here saying that this is a point of why he's such a great coach, to tell a team, this is the way it's going to go. And if you execute, we will win when it goes this way. And then it happens. Did he ever do that with you, Cam? You got a good example in your career where Mike did that maybe early on in your career, told you this is the way it's going to go. Not even if it's just you with the team that just sticks out with you. This is the way it's going to go, and it went that way.
I think it's come to like that a lot, not just in my career, but a lot of guys, over the years, even looking back at the Nick Herbig situation, it wasn't just hyping, it was manifesting. It was telling Nick that you're capable of doing everything you want on that field once we get to Sunday. I talk about, I remember one year playing Baltimore, and we were just talking about it's your contemporaries, not only your position, but your contemporaries you play against, and they can't live together. And I remember it was funny. We were talking about Najee versus Patrick Queen. Mike T talked about both of you guys can't remain in the AFC North. And look how it worked out. We now have Najee and Patrick Queen in the AFC North for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's fun to see those comparisons he brings up. And it's a level of competition, but it's also a level of, man, we got to get this now if we want to get to where we want to go.
That's Cam Hayward. He's going to have his hands full on Sunday as the Steelers go to Pittsburgh in the Pennsylvania Bowl. Eagles are favored by 5.5, which kind of surprises me a little bit. Could be a low-scoring game. Both defenses outstanding, and this could be really good. I mean, you look at the lineup for the late games on Sunday. There are two doozies in there. Buffalo at Detroit. That's all of them 425 in the late window, by the way. Buffalo at Detroit, and then Pittsburgh at Philadelphia. What a tremendous matchup there. And even the night game is pretty good. Green Bay at Seattle. Green Bay is 9-4, and Seattle is on the upswing. They're 8-5, and it seems likely, a lot can happen in the last 4 games, but seems to be a possibility that Washington would go to Seattle for a wild card game in Week 1. But Cam Hayward and the Steelers, big surprise this year. I think that most Steeler fans looking at the quarterback situation this year, Justin Fields and Russell Wilson went, And now that, they're going to be a playoff team and maybe a team that can make some noise, it's like, but they have had a history under Mike Tomlin recently of having first-round exits, and there's going to be some griping if they go out in the first round again. But what a spectacular regular season they have put together so far. All right, that is a wrap for me. Commanders back on the practice field today. We'll have lots of reaction to that tomorrow. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.